Welcome to the Create Your Story podcast, with conversations on creativity, self-leadership and personality to inspire and support your wholehearted life. I'm Terry Conlon, author, creative transition coach, teacher and personality type practitioner. Before we begin today's episode, I'd like to pay my respects to the Dharawal people, the traditional custodians of the land where I'm recording this podcast, and extend that respect to the traditional owners of lands across Australia and to elders past, present and emerging. You can find the episode show notes, your free copy of Chapter 1 of my book, Wholehearted Self-Leadership for Women in Transition, and lots more information at quietwriting.com. Now settle back and enjoy today's show. Welcome to episode 7 of the Create Your Story podcast, and it's the 28th of December as I record this, and we're in that lovely liminal time between Christmas and New Year with an opportunity to reflect on what the past year has taught us and the chance to plan and set some intentions for 2022. I'll certainly be making some time for past year reflections. My word of 2021 has been author, so it's been wonderful to step into that space and publish my Wholehearted Books and so much more. And I'm crafting up New Year intentions around my 2022 word of the year, which I will reveal soon, so stay tuned. I'm thrilled today to have my friend Lynn Hanford-Day join us for the podcast. Lynn is a virtual artist working with sacred geometry, mandalas and Islamic pattern. Lynn is also dual qualified as a coach, psychotherapist, and works with women in transition who are seeking meaning, purpose, and well-being. Lynn is especially interested in creativity and intuition, positive psychology, and strengths, helping people to access and express their inner wisdom. Lynn helps women discover clarity and confidence, path, and purpose. Lynn and I met via our mutual interest in creativity. You might remember Lynn from episode 3 in the Wholehearted virtual book launch. Lynn has also written a wholehearted story for the Quiet Writing blog called Breakdown to Breakthrough, which I also draw on in my book Wholehearted, as Lynn's story resonated with mine in so many ways. Lynn's wholehearted story tells of how she moved from burnout and a corporate HR career to working with sacred geometry and crafting a multifaceted career as an artist, coach, facilitator and therapist working with women in transition and organisations going through change. And that's what we chat about today in this episode. Transition, Lynn's creative journey to developing an artist's life alongside her corporate career. Art and creativity is a source of healing and growth, and intuitive ways of living, working and creating. Just a reminder before we head into the podcast about the 2 programs I'm offering to kick off 2022. Firstly, if you're looking for community, support and accountability for living a more wholehearted life, join me and a fabulous group of women in the Wholehearted Self-Leadership Book Club, gathering to read and work through Wholehearted together throughout 2022. So it's part book club, part group coaching, but a gentle, focused way to keep wholehearted living front of mind and to make progress in the transitions and transformations you desire in the coming year. If you're looking for community support and accountability to get writing done in 2022, join me and Beth Cregan for a writing road trip. We begin with a free challenge in late January, which focuses on your writing identity, and then we shift into a 6-week course that looks at your writing roadmap and where you want to head, what you want to create. And then we come together for a 6-month community writing program where the writing gets done in earnest together and with support. Links for both are in the podcast show notes on quietwriting.com, or head to my Insta bio at Writing Quietly for the links. So now let's head into the interview with the lovely and inspiring Lynn Hanford-Day. Lynn, welcome to the Create Your Story podcast, and thank you for your connection and your support of Wholehearted and Quiet Writing.
Hi, Terry. It's really good to be here. I'm feeling a bit nervous and also excited, so I really appreciate the offer and the invitation to take part.
It's a great pleasure to talk with you today and to explore more about you and more about your work in the world to share with others. So we've connected in many ways around creativity, wholehearted living, art and writing, and so much more on our journey together. So it's great today to be able to share some of those conversations that we've had more publicly and with others. So can you provide an overview about your background, about how you got to be where you are now and the work that you do?
Yeah, I've got a corporate background. I've spent over 30 years working in human resources, and 25 of those years at director level. And I've been in work for 40 years because I'm 61 now, to my horror. But art came into my life in 2014. So in parallel with becoming self-employed, I've also developed a life around being an artist. And that's obviously what we're going to talk about more as we go through the conversation today. But I've got this mix of corporate work and non-corporate work.
Yeah, so very much like me, you've had that shift in midlife from one life that was sort of going down one path and another life, but both of us heading towards more creative living. So we've both shared that major transition from long-term career, yours, as you said, in the case of corporate HR, to that more creatively focused life. So can you describe what that transition's been like for you, how long it took, and what the main turning points were for you?
I covered some of this on the guest blog post I wrote, didn't I? Which is, I think, about 3 years ago now, Breakdown to Breakthrough. So in 2013, I had a breakdown. I didn't work for a year and a half. Some of the impact of that time was quite catastrophic because I did lose my job. There was no way I could continue working beyond the kind of paid period of sick leave. So we agreed that I would leave, and then I ran out of money. So I sold my house in order to get hold of some of the equity that was left in that, which wasn't huge. And as I came through the other side of that, I became self-employed because I knew I needed to change the way I lived. I recognised that I was my job and how unhealthy that can be. But it was also the way in which I could earn a living. So I turned to consultancy and executive coaching and interim management, which is a kind of form of being an agency temp. So I did that. But what had entered my life while I was unwell, which was kind of unexpected, but was also the path forward. It was part of the breakthrough story, this unexpected arrival of creativity in my life. And I started playing around with various courses. It actually began with colouring books. And I got into some online art courses. And I was always fascinated by mandalas and patterns. So I tried to find a class and I couldn't. So I bought a book from Amazon and a pair of compasses and started playing. And it was in 2014, through some serendipitous events, that I then found a school in London called the Princess School of Traditional Arts, which actually teaches a master's programme based on geometry, but people can work with a huge range of mediums. So it could be stained glass, or it could be painting, or it could be sculpting or marquetry, all kinds of things. And they run public courses. And that's where I began to immerse myself in this practice. So I've had a thread alongside my ongoing corporate work that's been developing my creative process and becoming an artist, which surprises me even now that I would ever describe myself in that way. I haven't touched paint since I'd left school, so, over 30 years ago, and it keeps me sane. It's really important to me now.
It's just such an amazing story, and I know you've moved to the seaside and working as an artist in a more full-time capacity.
It's not full-time. My work kind of flexes. It's feast or famine, as most people would say when they become self-employed. So it is something that I tend to do on a weekend or some in the evening if I'm doing some full-time work in an organisation. But more recently, I completed a contract at the end of March, and over the last 6 months, I've given myself quite a lot of time and space to what I call faff. So I'm earning my degree in faffing and spending a lot of time walking by the sea and making the most of this lovely place that I moved to 2 years ago. And I also thought, I'm going to paint every day, which I haven't because it's been summertime here. So I wanted to get out of the house with the ending of lockdown and just experience, nature and some fresh air. But so the art kind of comes and goes. But in the last couple of months in particular, it seems to have really taken on a life of its own again. So I was super excited a couple of weeks ago to become part of a new gallery that's opened in the town here in Eastbourne. And they had an open evening last week where it was for all the artists being represented. I met a heap of other lovely people. So I'm really excited about seeing my work properly hanging on a dedicated wall space. So that's really good. And the Instagram followers that I've got just keeps on growing. And that's gone a bit wild in the last 2 or 3 weeks as well, where a particular new piece that I've been posting seems to have attracted a lot of interest. And I've gained about 200 followers in 3 weeks, and it's like, where's this all coming from?
That's fantastic, and it's been wonderful. We've been connected for quite some time now. So watching your journey over that time and how you're managing to shift into what you love to do, and as you say, flexing, as we all have to do with income and balancing creative living with resources and with freedom, creative freedom as well. So that's wonderful. So you mentioned your wholehearted story on quiet writing, which you shared about your journey from breakdown to breakthrough. So what did you learn from moving through and on from such difficult times?
It was such a pivotal, it wasn't a moment, it was a protracted period of time. And what happened for me is during 2012, I had begun to feel very, very tired. And I can remember at Christmas time a meeting of the leadership team at work and saying, I feel like I've run into a brick wall and I'm really looking forward to, I was going to take the full Christmas through to New Year break. And I returned to work something like the 6th or 7th of January. So I did a day back at work, and the following morning I couldn't move. So my body decided for me. And it was a really serious message of like, you have got to stop. And so physically, I was stopped. I saw my GP. I worked with a counsellor. I was on antidepressants. And my counsellor was also a mindfulness teacher. So I got obsessed with the notion that meditation is good for you. That she was a very wise woman who said, what you need to do is learn to relax. You're actually not capable of meditating right now. She kind of did demonstrate that to me. She gave me a CD, which I just found impossible to listen to. So that got put to one side. But I was in denial for probably 3 months, probably through to Easter time, that I was actually ill. I kept telling myself, I'll be back at work. I've got the budget to do. I never did go back to work, ever. So during that time, it was almost a gift. And I was very aware of kind of going very, very deep within. Once I was able to concentrate a bit better, I did start to return to some books about Jung. This is one of our other connections around Jung and types and archetypes and so on. And there's an expression from Carl Jung about having an unlived life. And I got a real sense that that's where I was at, that I had become my job. I was very overly identified with it. And that there was an opportunity here to explore who I was in the world, beyond my job. As I started to recover, to have the energy to think about what do I want to do in the future. And part of that was also the time spent painting and playing, giving myself a lot of time to play. And also visiting Ireland. A dear friend of mine had moved to Ireland in the middle of 2012 to retire there with her husband. She's on the west coast, on the Dingle Peninsula, right at the end of the peninsula. And I stayed with her many, many times. And that space was also very important space because of the nothingness of it. And it was just a very magnificent seascape and very barren land, which was also incredibly beautiful. But I loved being able to just sit in my car to protect myself from the incredible wind that they get. It really blows a gale. But I loved the sense of the wind, of being sat in the car and just staring off into space. And I think that was important time as well. So that transition was, I think, made up of many threads with an inner journey. Support from medical professionals and medical help, support of friends, the time in Ireland, and this kind of emergence of creativity and the willingness to encounter my own intuition and what my heart was saying. So it was a soul journey. And I think there are many wise people who do describe breakdowns or severe episodes of depression as the heart seeking to speak. And I love the expression about being depressed to be rewritten as the two words deep rest. And that's what I needed, was deep rest, because I had incredible burnout. And that was the other part. And the feeling of just turning to ash. There was so little left in terms of energy.
You described that beautifully, that challenging situation in that image of turning to ash, which really resonated with me too. And I think just what I'm hearing you say and what I've experienced also through my own experiences, which are not the same, but have some similar hallmarks and milestones, is that loss of identity, or that having to reshape identity, because I think too, particularly when we're invested in one path or in work, our identity gets very stitched into that. And then when we need to recalibrate or something happens and we're unable to continue down that path, I think that emptiness you describe and that space is often what we need to work with to regather ourselves and collect ourselves and redefine ourselves.
Completely. I met with a friend yesterday and we got into a conversation about unravelling. And I know you and I think, connected through Susanna Conway. One of her online courses is about unravelling the heart. And it's a wonderful word. And talking with my friend and also other people through working as a coach, I think there are so many people before COVID, and particularly in a post-pandemic world, who've got that sense of unravelling. And once you've identified various threads, the opportunity to reintegrate, what do we want to now make of ourselves and this moment going forward? So unravelling, transition, there's a lot of it about. The world is unravelling, isn't it? The whole world, the whole planet is unravelling.
Absolutely. Yes, when you think about transition, the way I've been thinking about it, just in the context of my book, Wholehearted, is the individual journeys, but also now we're in the context of a global transition as well. So it's multi-layered.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I love that word, wholehearted. I know when I first got to know you and got your newsletters and you'd created the Wholehearted blog, there was something about that word that really spoke to me. So hence participating as a guest blog writer, because I really wanted to spend time asking myself what a wholehearted life looked like as I came out of this kind of space of falling apart, unravelling. I think it's more than a word, and to really inquire into what does it mean to be wholehearted and what does a wholehearted life look like.
No, your contribution and the contributions of others to that blog series has been so powerful because every woman has brought their own story and has also found in the writing of that story and the thinking about that story what it means for them. So I've been really grateful for that, for opening up my own insights. Each story seems to open up the opportunity for other women to think about it differently too.
It does.
So tell us more about sacred intuitive art and what you focus on in your artwork.
I kind of fell into a niche without realizing it. So as a child, I loved spirograph and making, spirals and flowery patterns. And I loved kaleidoscopes, labyrinths, mazes, that kind of stuff. But as I went through my childhood and adolescence, I would love colouring and messing about with paint, because I never embraced it as a potential way forward as a career. I wanted to be a doctor or a teacher. So art didn't really feature. But I have always loved mandalas, and particularly Tibetan Buddhist mandalas. And I guess I've always been fascinated by pattern. So right through to my 30s, I was a knitter. So I was more into textiles. And so I would make Aran patterns, Fair Isle patterns, lacy jumpers made of mohair. So it was still always about the pattern. So I think that's something that's within me. And in the corporate world, in terms of organizational change and organizational systems and group dynamics, a lot of that's about patterns of behavior. And I trained as a psychotherapist along the way, like you do. So I qualified in 2008. But a lot of that was about the repeated patterns of our own behavior and where they may originate from, whether they're helpful or hindrances. So there's always been something about pattern. So when I really fell into art, I think it came and claimed me. What I was really finding myself doing was drawing circles. And one of the teachers I was with asked me why I kept drawing circles. I said, I've no idea. I like circles. But I thought maybe I'm just going round in circles. Maybe it was some kind of metaphor for where I was in my life. And she just said it's a really ancient symbol. So perhaps it's worth exploring. I do prefer circles to squares. We all have our preferences. So as I discovered the Princess School of Traditional Arts and started doing some classes with them, it just spoke to me so much. And the underlying symbol and meaning of circles, triangles, squares, curves, or straight lines, and so on. I never thought I'd be talking about geometry, but I don't really do it for the maths. I do it for the underlying meaning. And it's possible to look at any pattern and say, that's a lovely pattern, I like it, or I don't like it. But what really stirs my heart is the origin of the pattern and where it's come from. And the meaning of square and circle is consistent across all traditions, whether it's Islamic or Buddhist or Celtic or North American. So the circle represents heaven, and the square represents the earth, and they are brought together to bring heaven on earth. And then there's many, many other layers of meaning depending on the pattern, and that excites me so much. I created a sacred intuitive arts as a means of showing my work. I started to put my work on Instagram because I wanted to have a kind of digital gallery that I could see the progression of my work. I wasn't on it to deliberately sell my work. That wasn't the conscious reason, but that's what grew. And the name, I mean, how do we invent names? It was sacred from sacred geometry and intuitive arts, because the other thing I'd got into quite early on was intuitive and expressive arts, which I discovered was an actual thing for people who aren't artists. And it's actually quite abstract work. And I was kind of doing both. And as I built up my own geometry practice, I wanted to combine them. There's a big theme for me in life about integration. So what I tend to do is use layers of colour in the background and then place a geometric pattern on top of it. And that's how I'm playing with colour and shape and form. And my Instagram account is heading towards 1,700 followers now. And I'm like, gosh. And I sell most of my work through Instagram. I had a website built in about 2016. And then I didn't pay much attention to it in the last 2 or 3 years because my mum died and then my dad died and I got preoccupied with other personal matters. So I came back to it this year and had it rebuilt. So that went live in August. So it's a new website, which I'm really thrilled with because I'm just like, gosh, it's all my work. Look at that. I know you write about having a body of work. So doing the website was really revealing as to just how much I've done. Not all my work is on that website, but it was a moment to reflect and take stock and to see that transition from my early work to what I produce now.
It's been the most incredible journey. And two things I love, that thread of that love of patterns through all different aspects of your life and your artwork, and also your personality through your workplace and the sort of modalities that you've focused on and the tools that you've used. And then secondly, just how wonderful it's been watching you share your artwork and also your process. I think that's probably one of the things I know I love and people love on Instagram and through websites is seeing the artistic or the writing process, going through it and being able to almost participate in that process as well as seeing the beautiful art created. And your new website is just stunning. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I love listening to other artists describe their process and seeing the work in progress photos. And I actually began selling my work through Mind, Body, Spirit shows. So I would have a stall and display my work. And that was such good fun. And what I learned is people are really interested in who you are as an artist. How did you get to do this? And also people are really interested in the story of a picture. Because for many people, this creative process is alien. We lose it usually through school. I think schools have got a lot to answer for in how we kind of take creativity out of childhood. It's such a shame. And then as adults, we become fascinated with people who have this creative intention as part of their life. So I just got to the stage of thinking, well, I love watching other people paint. I mean, isn't that weird? But I love watching paint dry from other people and seeing how they go about it. So I thought, well, why not do that myself and just talk about what I'm actually creating? And I end up having some lovely online chats through Instagram with people who, are curious and want to ask a question or give some kind of reflection on the work. That's so enjoyable. Interaction.
Yeah, and I think Instagram's such a great medium for that too, isn't it? It's the instant side of it and the fact that it's visual as well as the ability to have conversations.
Yeah.
No, it's fantastic. So we both love spirals. The spiral imagery and the mandalas you feature in your work, and they also feature in my Quiet Writing logo, which has the Nautilus with the Fibonacci sequence, and the cover of my book Wholehearted features that. So I just thought it might be nice for us to have a chat about spirals. What is it that about spirals that attracts you or attracts us generally to them, do you think?
I'm not sure, Terry. I know I've always loved them. And there's something about the movement towards the centre. And there's also something about the movement that's contained within a spiral as well. So there's a kind of energy and a vibration in a spiral. that attracts me. And then you also get enormous metaphors around how we spiral through life. So at a kind of cerebral level, I find that fascinating and also very true. But spirals, they're so easy to draw, aren't they? You can sit doodling spirals, which I frequently do. And then you get people on the beach here where we have a lot of pebbles, and people go and use the pebbles and make spiral patterns out on the beach, or build a labyrinth from them and so on. So I think there's something really deep rooted in the psyche over millennium about a spiral. So what calls you? Because I love the Fibonacci sequence as well, and the whole kind of ammonite shell and a nautilus.
Yeah, I definitely feel drawn to them. And for me, for my business, for Quiet Writing, and for the book, it's that idea of repeating lessons, like going over the same ground. I'm drawing a spiral with my hand as I'm talking, which is doesn't really work on the audio waves, but that idea of spiraling. But often it's as we're learning and going through life, we're repeating lessons, and often because of how we're wired or how we're brought up, it's often similar lessons, but we're often repeating them, but learning at a higher level. So that idea of wholehearted, and the work that I do is about that idea of creating our story and building our wisdom through all the things that we go through, but learning and, going deeper, but it's also like going higher. And often we'll find that there's that repetition of patterns or of learning and behavior, or of the same thing cropping up, and you think, well, there's that thing again,
Yes.
How have I dealt with that? What resources do I have? How can I do this better? So I think, to me, it's a very integrating. You mentioned integration before. So that idea of how we seek to be whole, I think, is what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah, and just listening to you describe that, I've got the image of the spiral staircase. So you can have a spiral as kind of flat on a piece of paper, or make one in the garden out of shells or something. But if we turn it into that kind of 3D representation of how we spiral through life, we can move up another level and still see what was beneath, and see the repetition or the similarity, and then look up as to, do I need to build on this repetition in order to move wherever we're seeking to develop in our self-leadership or other aspects of our life.
Oh, I love that. And I love spiral staircases too. So for people at the beginning of such a journey, or a feeling of being a bit stuck or lost or going through major turning points, but wanting more creativity or a different life, what advice would you offer from your experiences about that really tough time going through that big transition?
I would say be willing to sit with the discomfort, whether or not it's a breakdown or some kind of severe illness or some other aspect of crisis that happens for, I think, most of us at some points in our lives. They are deeply distressing, uncomfortable periods of time. And in a world of busyness and doing, then to sit in opposition to busyness and doing, and the impulse to find the solution. I certainly felt that, and I felt that I've got to get back to work. And obviously money is a feature of that. But what I've learned since then and over the years since is there is a message in the discomfort. And if we don't slow down, then we don't always get that message. Hence repeating patterns, because it comes back to bite us on the bum in some way. But I think that's how I would sum it up, and use help if necessary to kind of stay in that space. So whether it's through a therapist, trusted friend, a coach, I know you do coaching too, and I do as well. There are people and spaces and places available to give yourself that time. And even if it is only an hour a week with a therapist or a couple of hours with a coach, it can be so valuable to allow something to emerge. Because I've found that the heart will often speak in a whisper, and we need quietness. to really connect with that. Some people manage to do that through meditating. I do it through painting. I suspect yours is through writing. But to find something that allows us to connect inwards and listen to that voice inside, no matter the discomfort that's going on around.
No, that's very wise and hard won insight. So, yes, thank you for that. And when we had the virtual launch and we had a chat about a similar theme, we talked about living with uncertainty too, which I guess is part of that discomfort. I talk in my book about the William Bridges sort of change management model, which I know you'd know from your HR work as well, but that idea of that messy, difficult middle, which feels so uncomfortable and uncertain, but it's also where the great potential is too. So.
Yeah, completely. And that word transition, we use it for giving birth, don't we? So we know that transition's painful. Have to go through it.
Absolutely. And I think your point about support too is absolutely critical, because that's the other thing I found. I know you found they're incredibly difficult journeys, and it's about identity, as we've said earlier, which can be quite unsettling. And then it also can feel quite lonely, because it feels like no one else has been through this type of thing. But as we're talking now, often you'll find people who have one step ahead or have been through or have the strategies for dealing with people who have been in such moments of difficulty and crisis, and it's important to reach out. So that's a great reminder. So a question that I'm asking each person who comes on the podcast is, how have you created your story over your lifetime?
How have I created my story? Haphazardly. Organically. I've kind of gone through life in a fairly opportunistic way. I've not consciously set out to, have this or be that or, live somewhere. I know some people do. So I guess what I'm saying, I'm not particularly goal focused. Maybe I should be. I don't know. So I've created my story, particularly in the last 10 years or so, often by looking back to notice the threads and the patterns, particularly in approaching my 50s and then approaching 60, which horrified me. Of how the hell did I get here? And why am I still asking the question, what do I want to be when I grow up? It doesn't ever seem to go away. So I guess I've created my story backwards, which is curious, actually, in talking now with you about this. Because a lot of people would say look forwards, and coaching is very much about forward focus and forward momentum. And I suppose it's in the last 3 or 4 years since my mum died, and then my father died, and then moving to Eastbourne, which was 2 years ago, that was actually much more deliberate and much more focused around intention. And after my mum died, it was also a year in which 3 friends died of cancer. And I think that death does put us in contact with life and often leads us to reflect on, oh, well, it could all be over tomorrow. Because actually, yes, it could be. None of us know. And as I've, become older and got bigger and bigger numbers for my age, the realization that time is passing. So how do I want to live my life, and what does a wholehearted life look like for me at this moment in time? And what do I imagine myself doing when I'm 65 or 70, if I'm given that time? What do I want it to look like? So I've become much more conscious. And one of those desires was to have an art studio by the sea. So I've managed to move to the seaside 2 years ago, and I still do my art from home. Finding an art studio has proved to be quite elusive, but I'm lucky that the work I produce can be done from a table in the kitchen, which is what I do.
Oh, that's wonderful. Your story makes me think of, in the writing circles, that some people outline and plan ahead and, fairly goal focused. And there's others who they talk about plotters and pantsers, and the pantsers fly by the seat of their pants and are more organic, like you described. But there's often a point in a draft of a book where they'll do a reverse outline. And the people who have that tendency and stop and then go back and make sense of what's happened to then work out where to go next. So it sounds very much like your story's been created that sort of way, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I guess I am a kind of here and now person, and I'm opportunistic. The other thing I've learned, particularly in the last 6 months, is I am quite good at manifesting. So I need to be careful about these thoughts that says, wouldn't it be good if, because literally it arrives the next day. I'm like, oh my God, no, not yet, not now, I'm not ready. So
that's wonderful.
That tells me there's something about alignment and noticing opportunities and so on. So yeah, be careful what you wish for. But watching you go through the process of writing your book, which I remember you starting that a few years ago, there are some things we need to work at and have a discipline around, aren't they, in order to manifest the creation of a book or the creation of a painting, whatever it might be. Find our dream home. We need to stick at. Sometimes it's not always going to come immediately.
Absolutely. And I think often it's a nice mix between the two when it works well, as we're manifesting, we're setting the intentions, but we're also putting the work in, getting the skills, which is obviously part of your artistic journey, and my own writing one, and putting in that hard inner work too. That's the other thing in your story and mine, is that it's the showing up to the page and the showing up to life is also because of doing that hard inner work over time and going on retreat, learning new skills and moving through that discomfort, as you talked about earlier.
Yeah, completely.
So you've read my book, I know, and you very kindly gave me some wonderful advanced praise, which is much appreciated. So you know about the wholehearted self-leadership tips there. So what are your top wholehearted self-leadership tips and practices for women based on your experiences to add to my body of work?
I come back to that, building on what I said about sitting with the discomfort, that there is, I think, something here about the importance of paying attention to your inner weather and noticing what brings joy as well as what brings discomfort. We're kind of wired for negativity as a species because it's there to protect us and to serve us. Yes, for myself, again, it's only in recent years that I've really paid attention to what brings me joy and pleasure and playfulness, contentment, satisfaction, and so on. And some of that is through the world of work. But as a workaholic in recovery, then it's been about paying attention to where does joy come from beyond the workplace. Because, I'm not going to be prancing around as an HR director for the rest of my life. I don't want to. So where does it come from? And then to give yourself the time to do it, if it's a thing that you do, or if your joy comes from sitting staring at the sea for an hour, which is what I do, then allow myself to do it. So there's something about the allowing as well.
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you. And as you were saying, that beautiful list of words of joy and fulfillment, and that beautiful list that you shared with us, I was feeling all warm inside. That just tapping into the more positive aspects of life, I think, is so true. And often they're very simple, like it's just a cup of tea in the sunshine. And for me, swimming is a big source of joy, and a lot of that is about just being in the moment. So
Yes, it is. And this is where, mindfulness practitioners are constantly encouraging us to be, is in the here and now and in the moment. And I've learned the truth of that is really powerful. And to just step outside, literally, to go into nature, or to step outside the busyness of the day. And it doesn't need to take up huge amounts of time either. We often say, I can't do that, I haven't got time. I have given myself the discipline of doing it. And some of that happened in the first lockdown, because I do live literally across the road from the sea. And it came from a suggestion from a friend, because I post lots of pictures of the sea onto my Facebook page with friends. And she said, why don't you turn it into a potential installation piece, which I haven't done. But I then took a video of the sea every day for 3 months. And I was working during lockdown. I was working from home, doing my HRE stuff. But having that commitment to literally go outside, no matter what the weather was, because it began in March, so we get quite a lot of storms, it was to just stand there and take a 30-second video. And that turned into go for a walk, go sit by the sea, go meditate by the sea.
Powerful practices, and easy habits to get out of and easy habits to get into too. So that's a great reminder for everyone listening. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been such a beautiful conversation, and so many layers and great things to draw on from a conversation today. So thank you for sharing so much of yourself and your beautiful work. So if you can let people know where people can find more about you and your art and work online.
Thanks, Terry. Thank you so much. It's been a lovely conversation. People can find me on my website, which is sacredintuitivearts.com, and also on Instagram, and my Instagram handle is the same name. So
thank you so much. It's been a great joy speaking today.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. Go well.
Thanks for listening today, and I hope you found it inspiring and supportive. You can find the episode show notes, get your free copy of Chapter 1 of Wholehearted, and find out more about my books, coaching, and other offerings at quietwriting.com. Connect with me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, where I am at Writing Quietly. Please leave a review on your favourite podcast app too, to help others find the show and create their story. And warmest wishes for you as you create your story in the world.